This is 6.1, part 6. These are the last two problems in these notes, and both of these are fairly difficult. I want to make sure that you see the tricks you have to use occasionally. These are definitely not as common as the ones we've done already. If you can follow these, you're going to be in really good shape. Okay, so we're first of all, look to see if you can factor out a GCF. A 2 would go in here, 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 but not here. A Z would go in here, but there's no Z here. So it would have to work for all four, and so we don't have an option. Okay. Now, look at this, okay? I'm going to kind of do an aside here. Look at these two. What would I be able to factor out of these? I could only factor out a 2, right? And that would give me, I would need a Z squared plus 3W. Don't worry too much about this yet. I'm just kind of showing you stuff. All right, look here. What could I factor out? A Z or a negative Z? But am I going to get a Z squared at all out of this if I factor anything out of it? No. So even if I change this to plus and negative and keep my groups the same, factoring by grouping is not going to work in this order. Okay? Now, before you decide that this is not going to work at all, always rearrange your groups, okay? And since we also want a plus sign in the middle, and the easiest way to reorder your groups is to switch your two terms in the middle. So let's do that and see if it works. It's possible it won't. Okay. So now let's look at our groups. I can factor out, I can factor out a Z here, so I'm not going to end up with a Z squared inside the parentheses like I did here. That was my big clue that it wasn't going to work because there was no way I was going to get a Z squared out of these two. It didn't even exist. Okay, so let's group and see if it works. Okay, so for these two, I can factor out a 2. I have a Z squared and a Z, so factor out the Z. Z squared times Z would give me 2Z squared minus 2Z, it needs to be a 4Z, so I should multiply that by a 2. Plus. For these two, I could factor out a 3, and there is a W in both of them. So I can factor that out. And when I do that, here I get a 2, and here I just get a minus Z. Okay? Now I want these two things to be the same, and they're not. But they are very, very, very similar. All they are is a subtraction done in the opposite direction. Now, when you have that, you can always flip one of them around by factoring out a negative version of whatever you did. So I need to factor out a negative 3W instead of a positive 3W to flip this around, okay? So I'm going to go another step. I'm basically rewriting the first one. Plus, that's still that same plus sign, and let's factor out a negative 3W instead. Okay, and I'm still trying to get back to here. Negative 3W needs to become a positive 6W. So I need to multiply that by a negative 2. Okay? Negative 3W needs to become negative 3WZ, so I need to multiply that by a positive Z. Okay? Look what happened here. I have negative 2 plus Z, and this is exactly the same thing as Z minus 2. So now these two things are the same. I'm going to write out this step. And flip that around. You probably will not need to write out all of these steps. Now these two things are the same, so we write that down once, and then create a new set of parentheses, 2z plus negative 3w, or better, z minus 2 times 2z minus 3w. This is a good time to say to anybody who's watching this video who has not been in my class that my z's and my 2's look a lot alike. My z's will always have a line through them. So if you're ever confused, that's how you tell them apart.